P3 Esg Workshop. Whether you're connected online or you're here with us in the smaller room in Prague, we're very happy you joined us. My name is Julie Paulson and I'll be moderating today's workshop. The topic for today is energy and renewables, and I have 4 great experts here who will take us through this big topic from very different angles. So let me welcome them and briefly introduce their presentations. We'll start with Juliana from Longevity. Hi, Juliana.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us again since last year. So Juliana will give us a legislation update and then she'll focus on the EPBD directive. Then we have Dries from Encon. Hi, Dries.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us as well. Dries will be speaking about the energy market landscape and will also give us an advice on how to have a flexible energy strategy in your organizations. Then we have Simon from DHL.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Simon. Nice to meet you. I'm very happy you joined us because DHL is one of our largest customers across Europe, so we're very happy to discuss these topics with you. Simon's presentation will be a bit more practical. He'll share with us their experience from implementing different solutions from PVs, heat pumps, and LEDs, and share some experience and roadblocks that they've encountered on the way. And then we have Cinziana, our Director of Transformation Sustainability at P3. Hi, Cinzi.
Hi, Julie.
Cinziana will focus on energy consumption and reduction that we're planning for our customers.
And yeah, let me join you in really extending a very warm welcome to everyone here with us, as well as those online. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us today. And especially a big thank you to our guests and partners here. I'm very much looking forward to your presentations and our discussions during this workshop. This is the second ESG workshop that we're doing, and it's a very different topic from last year. So last year, we were focusing on CSRD and the very big reporting task that was ahead of us. A lot of things have changed in the meantime with the omnibus earlier this year, the proposals from the European Commission that reduced dramatically the applicability of the CSRD mandatory requirements. We are now, let's say, the silver lining of these changes is that we now can focus on more concrete elements. So you've heard that the discussions today will be really around technologies, renewables, efficiencies. So all the elements that really will pave the way to become more energy efficient, better, to have a more environmentally friendly business. But technologies are only one aspect of the equation. To really make them successful, we need a very good communication and collaboration between landlords and customers. So I'd like to encourage everyone to keep that in the back of your mind throughout this workshop, as I'm hoping that through the interesting discussions and presentations today, we will spark a lot of interesting ideas, and this will be just the beginning of a lot of communication and collaboration throughout the year for ESG improvements to work together on really pushing this agenda forward.
Thanks a lot, Cinziana, for the opening. After all the presentations, we will have a Q&A and a panel discussion, so please ask questions. So I encourage you to do that anytime during the whole workshop. We'll be coming back to them at the end. We're using Slido, so again, very easy. Either use the QR code that you see on your screens, or go to Slido, the hashtag is P3ESG, and please ask any questions you may have for the experts we have here today. So I think we're ready for the first presentation. Gillian, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Cinzi, and thank you to P3 for hosting this again. I really enjoyed our conversation last year. As you said, Cinziana, things look a lot different, but that's not to say that regulation is gone, especially at the asset level, which we're going to focus on today. There is a lot of movement, particularly in Europe and particularly under the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So we'll be focusing on that. As just a quick background to myself and to Longevity Partners, my name is Gillian. As Julie introduced me, I am the head of our policy and regulation team. We are a global firm, but we'll be focusing today on European legislation in particular. We do everything from EU taxonomy alignment to asset level regulatory monitoring and support, as well as I like to say, our full stack ESG sustainability consultancy. So we have a lot of experience navigating these regulations and working particularly from an asset management and development side of how to manage those risks and also those opportunities, which I'd like to speak about a bit today as well. But to start, maybe just to set the scene, I wanted to provide a quick market overview of what's going on and really what we're seeing in the logistics sector and in the broader real estate sector as a whole. I really like this graph from Savills, which was released at the end of last year, outlining, I think, what we're seeing in terms of trends and opportunities. Again, in the real estate sector broadly, but in particular for logistics, you're seeing a rising demand in logistics in Europe in particular, the growth of e-commerce, expansion of warehouse, necessary to meet the growing demand here. And what I found really, really interesting about this research is that there's a massive amount of interest and engagement with energy efficiency. So from a challenging perspective, energy consumption, don't think I need to tell the audience here how challenging it is managing and mitigating energy consumption, particularly in the logistics sector. But in addition to that, you've got increased investor scrutiny, especially under reporting frameworks. Even without the CSRD coming into play this year, I think we are certainly seeing a rise in demand of SFDR, Article 8 and Article 9 alignment, EU taxonomy, and just increasing investor interest and other stakeholder interest in ESG. And then on top of all of that, and this is certainly highlighted by the omnibus package that was proposed earlier this year, is an increase in regulatory uncertainty and divergence between jurisdictions, and certainly at different levels as well, between local all the way up until to supranational at the EU level. So there's a lot of challenges that are going on in the ESG space, but there's also plenty of opportunity as well. There's an increased demand for energy efficiency, in particular, the integration of renewable energy. That should be really exciting. Energy efficiency ultimately means lower cost in the long term, more future resilient buildings and assets and operations. In particular, and especially in Europe at a national and EU level, or the availability of financial incentives and subsidies to make those improvements and to ultimately reduce those operational costs. And then the integration of technologies and AI, particular for buildings, but also for supply chain management. This has been a massive trend that we've seen over the last few years, and it's something really encouraging. And I'm sure my panelists will dive further into that in the coming presentations. But to start quickly, the biggest driver at an EU level when it comes to asset level energy efficiency regulations is really the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, or the EPBD. It's a landmark piece of legislation. It's been around for over a decade now, but the recent revision that was passed in May of last year has the opportunity to be really transformative when it comes to requirements at a national and a local level for energy efficiency and asset management. As just a quick kind of taking stock of where we are at the moment, for those unfamiliar with the EU legislative process, once a directive has been transposed, has been passed at an EU level, member states have about 2 years to transpose that at a national level. So we're about halfway through that time period. And as you'll see, very few countries have managed to kickstart the process. But that being said, Austria, Czech Republic, Ireland, Poland, et cetera, have all started that transposition process, and we're tracking and monitoring those developments closely. Other European countries have already transposed provisions relating to financial incentives and tax breaks, which is a really welcome and exciting opportunity, I think, for both asset owners and tenants when it comes to implementing some of the changes and in particular the renovation measures that will be necessary under the provisions of the EPBD. And we're expecting as well the Commission to publish a voluntary portfolio framework to further help financial institutions scale up their lending volumes for energy renovations, including the use of green loans. So there's a lot that's happening in this space, and something to keep in mind while I kind of run through the scary key risks and regulatory requirements that are coming in under the revised EPBD. And we tend to split these across requirements for new builds. And when I'm talking about new builds, I'm also talking about major renovations, which are roughly, depending on the country, about 25% of the building envelope. They tend to then fall under the requirements under new construction as well. So it's something to keep a note of. And then, of course, existing assets. For new construction, major developments include an increase in electric vehicle charging infrastructure requirements. That includes ducting, and that includes the physical charging stations as well. What we used to know as the nearly zero energy building will be replaced by the zero emission building in 2030. So there will be increased development requirements and energy performance standards for new buildings. Something that is super prevalent and relevant for the logistics sector are the increased requirements for renewable energy installations on new buildings, major renovations, and also standing assets in the coming years. That's mandatory solar PV installation on rooftops, which is something that, you know, P3 has been fantastic about integrating into your portfolio already, but certainly something that we'll need to keep in mind as we move forward. In addition, mandatory carbon life cycle assessments and emissions limits. All new buildings will have to undergo some semblance of an LCA. And I might take the moment here just to pause and say that all of this is what's in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. How member states implement these requirements will vary. This is the minimum requirement, but certainly, and we're seeing this in countries like France, Germany in particular, there are already requirements that are more stringent than what the EPBD outlines. So it is really important from a risk mitigation perspective to be looking at those national and local level requirements that are informed by the EPBD. In line with carbon life cycle assessments, the sustainable procurement of construction materials will be very important moving forward and something to consider on all new developments. And then smart readiness technology as well, BMS or BACS systems, which I think, Simon, you'll be covering in a bit more detail. For existing assets, again, increased requirements for EV charging, BMS or building automation and control systems, also renewable energy installations, in particular for renovations, but increasingly for large non-residential buildings, including logistics assets. There will be requirements for standing assets as well. Minimum energy performance requirements and EPC requirements. Again, that's something that's going to be up to the member states to really figure out how to legislate for and regulate. Something really important to keep tabs on, and our recommendation here is really reviewing your existing stock, the buildings that you're in, and where you've got the highest risk and the lowest EPC ratings. Start there and start seeing where you might need to make those improvements. And of course, and very relevant for many logistics assets, refrigerant and HVAC systems, and compliance with F-gas regulations and similar bits of legislation there. So in terms of navigating ESG compliance and strategies, in particular in the wake of the omnibus package, I think there's been a bit of a pause in the market and a pause in ESG strategy setting and execution in trying to see how these regulations will evolve. But really the point that I think is important to make here is that regardless of reporting requirements, there are asset level requirements that are very important to keep tabs on. Some of the key market shifts that we've seen, particularly in the last 12 months, certainly since this last webinar this time last year, is again the reduction in regulatory reporting requirements for about 80% of companies, which were originally subject to the CSRD, who no longer are and are kind of navigating how do you now look at your priorities and the opportunities for implementing sustainability without necessarily being required to report against it in such a stringent way. Political backlash in certain US jurisdictions against ESG terminology. We found this in particular with a lot of our global partners and clients who have strong European presence and portfolios with very strong ESG KPIs and sustainability targets, struggling in their US jurisdictions and where if they're headquartered there and trying to navigate, okay, in one part of the world, ESG is welcome, if not regulatorily mandated, and in others, it's actually could be a hindrance to either raising capital or working in those specific jurisdictions. But what we've certainly seen, regardless of the omnibus package, regardless of developments in the US and in the rest of the world, is that investor demand for ESG has remained really strong. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, energy efficiency is just smart to integrate. It reduces operational costs. It reduces risk for both transitional and also physical. If we're looking at the energy crisis that we've been facing over the last few years, and something that over the events of the last few days will only become more relevant, reliance on oil, gas is becoming increasingly riskier, and having your own renewable installations reduces that risk substantially. And of course, and it's not something that we really touch on today, but climate resilience for assets as extreme weather and climate conditions continue to increase year on year. We're seeing a lot of investor interest in making sure that those risks are mitigated as well. So for us, from a higher level ESG strategy setting perspective, there are three recommendations that we really provide. The first is clearly defining ESG related targets. How you package that and sell that to your investors and your stakeholders, that can depend on, if you're interested in using ESG or repackaging it in a different way. But establishing what your in-house definition is of that and of sustainability, and then clearly communicating those targets so your stakeholders can begin to work with you and work towards meeting those. Embedding ESG into your core strategy, again, emphasizing the risk-adjusted value creation, climate resilience, operational efficiency. These are all positives of integrating ESG considerations at a portfolio or a corporate level. And then embracing voluntary standards. So for those who are not subject to mandatory reporting requirements, such as the CSRD, really figuring out a strategy and then that communication of what your alignment is, especially for European portfolios where a parent company or potential investors remain subject to those reporting requirements. And then returning to the asset level, in terms of best practices for energy performance, and again, I'll leave the technical expertise up to my fellow panelists, but from our perspective and in relation to regulatory risk in particular, there are three main areas that I think are important to consider. The first is optimizing energy use in facilities. That's looking at, that low-hanging fruit. Can you install LED lighting, conducting energy audits, getting a baseline sense of what the asset's energy consumption is, and then how you can work to reduce it. Leveraging renewable energy. Again, it's a fantastic opportunity to de-risk your asset and to increase other opportunities for engagement. So considering solar installations on facility rooftops, engaging in PPAs, and then of course on-site energy storage solutions, which I think you might touch on in a moment. And again, and I mentioned it in the beginning, there are a wealth of opportunities when it comes to financial incentives, feed-in tariffs, and other opportunities depending on the member state that you're in. So we really encourage when you do decide to consider integrating renewable energy at an asset level, looking at where you can leverage some of those financial incentives. And then finally, smart technology and data analytics. Being able to monitor energy consumption and getting a good baseline sense of what that is on a day-to-day. That will support reporting processes for those that are still subject. But also, and this is something I think, Simon, you'll touch on in the kind of landlord-tenant engagement, really opening up that communication between landlords and tenants and getting a sense of how much energy you're consuming and then where you can work together to increase efficiency and decrease operational costs, I think is a great opportunity there. And yeah, with that, I will pass on and interested in hearing more about the technical side as well. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Julian. And I can see already many questions coming in. So please, any questions related to legislation, please send them over and Julian will respond them later on. So I think we're ready for Dries and learn a bit more about energy.
Yeah, all right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. And also thank you, P3, for the invite and organizing this event, because I think it's very important for all stakeholders to share knowledge and to really, implement sustainability into our society. So thank you for that. Today, I will be talking a bit about energy flexibility and how that can future-proof your real estate. Maybe first to introduce myself very quickly. So my name is Dries Onders. I have a background in energy engineering, working for 7 years at Encon. Started as a project manager doing mainly construction of big wind turbines and solar projects. And today I'm the department manager for the energy transition team at Encon. For those that don't know Encon yet, we're an independent advisory agency that support our clients in any sustainability type of projects. So we have 10 departments, each with their own expertise, and on day-to-day business we do projects to fully implement the sustainability into their business. We're active in Europe and work from offices in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands, and we're over 100 employees. So the table of content for today, I will talk about some trends in the energy markets and about flexibility and how that integrates renewables into our energy mix. Then a framework that can give you some hands-on advice on how to implement this flexibility, and to finish off a call to action on the actual steps to be taken. But maybe as a first statement, I'm here to say that negative energy prices are, in my opinion, an opportunity. But to get there, maybe let me explain where these negative energy prices are coming from. And therefore, I will start with some energy trends. The first one is the electricity demand that is increasing over time. The last 2 decades, it has been increased with over 50%, and this is electricity demand. Maybe energy efficiency creates a decrease in overall energy consumption, but part of it is electricity. Other ones can be, for example, fossil fuels, but the electricity demand is increasing mainly due to electrification. That electricity needs to be produced and can come from different sources. What we see as well is that the renewable energy part in that energy mix is increasing over time. That's a good thing, of course, because that decarbonizes our total energy mix. And even for the future, previous slide was about the whole world's energy consumption. This is specific for European consumption. And the prognosis for the next 10 years is that the renewable energy part of this energy mix will even further increase, which is a good thing. But of course, anyone who has installed big solar plants, for example, that are producing a lot of energy, not every energy can be consumed at the moment on site, will be injected into the grid. And from time to time, that can be at moments with negative energy prices, negatively impacting the business case, which I will be talking about more in this presentation. But maybe a quick recap already of these first few slides. So what do we know? That electricity needs are increasing despite the energy efficiency being increasing, and that's mainly due to electrification of, for example, heating of buildings and mobility electric vehicles. And second, that the renewable energy part in the energy mix is increasing as well. More wind and solar installations are being installed as we speak, covering the need of electricity more and more, which is a good thing, of course. But of course, how does this impact negative energy prices? And to explain that, I will explain the principle of the merit order. The merit order is a supply and demand principle, where on the x-axis we have like the available power. So all plants that can produce electricity will be ranked from the cheapest marginal cost to the most expensive marginal cost. And the marginal cost is actually the cost to start up that plant to produce a kilowatt hour of energy. So you can have hydropower, solar and wind, the renewables, nuclear energy, coal as well, that has a CO2 cost as well with the ETS2. It can be lignite, steam and gas plants, the older gas plants, and the regular fuel. So this is a whole set of production units that will only be activated in function of a demand, a certain need of energy. Let's say at a given moment, there's a specific amount of gigawatt hours that a society needs as energy, and that will define how many of these plants will be started up. So any installation on the left side of this line will be starting up to deliver the energy, and that will define the price for at that given moment for the energy. It's important for electricity grid that supply and demand is always in balance, because systems, electrical consumers are only working properly if that balance is there, because some technical parameters are linked to that. So that's important to keep in mind. If this price is set, it's also interesting to know that the yield of each power plant on the left side of this graph gets its revenue from the most expensive source. So that defines the price at that moment, and it doesn't matter that you can produce that energy cheaper, it will just increase your yield. So the cheaper your energy production, the more yield you can make. What's also important to know is that this demand is dynamic. The consumption that we have at a given moment can differ from time to time. It's not that we always have the same consumption. So that's dynamic, and since the demand and supply needs to be in balance, that's a challenge to cover, but that has always been there, and some measures are being taken from the production side to follow the demands and to make sure that we have this balance in check. But what's new or newer is that with the increase of renewables, also the supply gets more dynamic. We don't choose when this energy is being produced, when the wind blows or the sun shines. So we don't actually choose when this energy is being produced, and it's not the demand that is being followed, but now suddenly the supply is there and the demand should change accordingly, which is a challenge and of course has a certain link with how the energy price is being defined. So that was a bit of technical knowledge, maybe a quick recap of that as well. So what do we learn? That energy production and consumption should always be in balance, and that demand is volatile, but that has always been. But what's new is that the supply with the increase of renewables is also becoming more volatile. So what's the consequence? That is that in some cases, the grid, the supply and demand, gets out of balance. And I have a specific example case. Imagine a situation, for example, on a Sunday afternoon, where we have low energy consumption, but a lot of sun, a lot of wind, a lot of energy production. Storage capacity like batteries or other types are still limited nowadays. And the conventional power plants, like for example nuclear plants, they at some point produce energy, and they're not that easy to shut off. It takes quite some time to turn down that production. So as a result, the grid gets out of balance. If the grid gets out of balance, measures have to be taken to restore that balance, and that can firsthand be with price impulses or signals, and worst case, that could be resulting in negative energy prices. So that's where negative prices are coming from. And for all organizations that don't do anything with it and just let it happen, that could be a threat for the investment in renewables, but also a threat for overall day-to-day consumption, because this was an example of negative prices. It could be as well that the prices increase dramatically in the positive side, that you have very high prices. In the same mechanism, it works like that. But of course, on the other hand, organizations that apply a resilient energy strategy can change this threat into an opportunity by providing flexibility. And that's where my presentation today is mainly going about. That's flexibility as a key to a resilient energy strategy. Maybe to start, with a definition of flexibility, it's nothing to do with yoga or acrobatics. It's more in the energy context. It's flexibility as an ability of an energy system to adjust its supply or demand in real time to maintain that grid balance. And there are 3 types of flexibility that can be applied. One of them is flexibility on the production side. One is flexibility on the consumption side. And one is about storage. The production side, that is mainly called curtailment. Curtailment means like the deliberate restriction, so the turn down of production that could have been produced of usually wind or solar. So the kilowatt hour that otherwise would be injected at negative prices, you will just not produce, which is kind of a pity, of course, because it could have been a valuable kilowatt hour, but at negative cost, there's no need in the market, so better not to produce it. So like that, you prevent the negative cost, or like the cost of energy injection. And how you can do it, that's mainly with an energy management system that can read out the market data to know when the negative prices occur, and then send a signal to your PV plants to turn down your production. And very often it's still interesting not to turn it down completely to zero, but to still cover your local needs of energy, because energy prices need to be very low to compensate for the additional cost of energy consumption from the grid that will still be applicable. Think about taxes, think about grid cost, those things still apply. And for the energy part in the energy consumption that needs to compensate for that needs to be very low. Can occur, but there's a space in between. Flexibility in consumption side, that's mainly like consumers, very often, for example, charging infrastructure that increase or decrease the consumption in function of what the energy prices are doing at that given moment. And this, of course, to benefit from negative or very low prices or prevent very high prices at a given event. And also that is being done with some kind of energy management system that reads this market data and sends a signal to the consumer. It can also be a heat pump or a heating element, sometimes even lighting. Any consumer that can be managed somehow, but very often it's about charging infrastructure that's very open to deliver flexibility as a consumption unit. Then about storage, that's of course the most known version of flexibility, a battery energy storage system, BESS. That's of course to release or to store energy at a given moment in time as a reaction to the market conditions. That could be as well a thermal battery. For example, if you have a freezer or like a heat pump with a big buffer of water, that can also increase its temperature and like that increase the consumption of the heat pump and be a storage unit like that as well. An important note here is that a battery very often has multiple streams of income. This is just one of them, but in the context of flexibility, I covered this one. Just very briefly about value stacking of batteries, what could it be as well? The second one is what we talked about today. That's like the supply and demand price mechanism, where you have different energy markets, but to keep it a bit more high level today, I will not go too much into that. What other types of streams of revenue you can have with batteries is increasing your own consumption of for example, solar energy, lowering your peak consumption because there's cost linked to that as well. Or for example, as a solution for any grid congestion issues that we have with the grid operator, that you can still further develop your core business without the big grid connection that you need. The BSP is a bit more complex, very high level explained. If the supply and demand market functioning is not covering the need to restore the balance in the grid, then a grid operator will intervene and activate some other assets and will remunerate those assets for delivering flexibility. But that's like a backup plan, let's say, if the normal price mechanism is not sufficient. That being covered, I have an energy transition framework with me today to explain how you can implement this flexibility, because it makes sense to see it as a bigger picture. I see a lot of clients focusing directly on battery energy storage systems, missing out on a few opportunities, and this framework brings a solution to that. It's in 6 steps. I've combined them in steps per 2 to keep it short. The first 2 are about electrification and energy savings. It makes sense, of course, to first define what your future energy consumption will be. If you're still using gas or other fossil fuels, it makes sense to electrificate to electricity by, for example, implying heat pumps or the charging infrastructure. That will increase your consumption, of course. Energy efficiency, on the other hand, will decrease your consumption. And with both, you see that your total yearly energy consumption will change at least. And that change in energy consumption is, of course, a starting point to define how much renewables you will need. And there you already see your first link. By the way, the pictures on the right are all projects that we've done that we supported our clients with. For example, the top one is about a big heat pump for one of our clients. Second one with a very dynamic charging infrastructure. So that's really being used to deliver flexibility. Every car that is being charged at the moment will have a very variable charging speed in function of that energy market that's being applied. And then the bottom one is about a relighting project, where on the right side you see a part of the site already being relighted, and on the left side that's the old lighting. There you see like the improvement in quality while still lowering your electricity bill, as an example of the energy efficiency project. Then about renewables and flexibility, also a few example projects. Of course, renewables, everyone knows that wind and solar are the main types of renewable energy production. But as being said, we don't choose when these systems produce the energy. So a certain flexibility or a change in our consumption is needed to fully properly use this energy production. And from flexibility point of view, what would you need is energy management systems for example, this flexibility on the consumer and producer side. Curtailment modules as well, and then the thermal storage or battery energy storage systems as example for energy storage when the first 2 are not covering this need of flexibility. It's to be said that the investment costs for batteries are very often a lot higher than the opportunities, the low-hanging fruit for example, the charging infrastructure to install an EMS and to use that as a source of flexibility. So that's why the opportunity is there to first investigate those options before you go to battery systems. Then the last 2 steps is to make the circle complete. Is a little bit less about the topic today, but cooperation is usually when you don't find the needs or covering all the needs of flexibility on site, you will look for solutions off site, and that can be, for example, with a direct line, a link with your neighbor that maybe has the space that you don't have in the case of you need it, or a PPA, a power purchase agreement, some sort of energy contract that you close with external parties. And then lastly, point 6 is the green energy contract with the energy supplier. That's in case that all other steps are not sufficient enough. Still, the last bit of energy that you consume from the grid better be a green energy contract. So again, some sub-conclusions is that a holistic approach of energy transition is definitely the way to go, because you're otherwise missing out on opportunities, and that there's a close link to all aspects of this energy transition. Of course, the question that I get a lot from my clients is a recommendation of what the negative prices will do in the near future. And I don't have like a future sight on what the actual will be, but I have a principle that I can explain that maybe help you understand how this mechanism works, and then you can make the link of what the prognosis will be of these negative prices. And that's let's start on the top right. Increase in renewables, we know that's happening. Renewables are being installed at a very high pace, and that increase in renewables creates a certain market volatility, like we saw in the merit order. That increase in market volatility opens up opportunities for flexibility to be implemented. The more flexibility is being implemented, the more these extreme prices are being mitigated, and creating again more opportunity for more renewables to be implemented to further decarbonize our energy mix. So like that, this is like an upward circle, or like creating the opportunity for each other, strengthening each other's opportunity. So what we can conclude out of that is that flexibility is somehow cannibalistic, that there will be some kind of equilibrium between renewables and flexibility of some sort, filtering out these extremes in while still the market, it will not go to completely zero. The opportunity will still be there, but since the flexibility is lagging behind on the development of renewables, we see these extremes today in the market. And as long as this gap is not being closed, the opportunity is still there for everyone investing in flexibility up to a certain point where the flexibility, nobody will invest in flexibility if the opportunity is not big enough. So a minimum of yield you will always be expecting in the near future as well. But the big opportunity is now, since the gap is bigger between the renewables and the flexibility. So that's why investors making fast decisions and going for flexibility today, they are making the biggest yields, and it will not go to zero, because we will always need flexibility to further develop these renewables. That's where the opportunity is coming from, and why you see in the market that many players going so fast in this investment of batteries. While it's not a low-risk investment, of course, but with this principle, they believe that this development will continue in the next years, and that's why they also take the leap to invest. So that being said, the call to action, what you can do today. I have some tips and advice for you. So first, definitely apply this holistic approach. Don't just focus on batteries, but see it as a bigger system. Take into account what your future consumption will be, what other assets you have to offer flexibility, because it will be a missed opportunity if you don't. Do it fast, because this gap between renewables and flexibility is now bigger than ever before, and will close because everyone is focusing on on flexibility. So the early adopters will have the biggest opportunities. And lastly, collaborate with the right stakeholders. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in these kind of projects, in these flexibility projects. Think about building owner, the tenant, a third-party investor, an aggregator combining all these different assets, an EPC contractor that installs the hardware, an energy advisor, of course, to make the right decisions, and an energy provider that's also playing a major role in the energy interacted with the grid. And many more for sure, but all of them needs to be aligned to have a proper flexibility project. So finally, the general conclusion. The energy transition is evolving rapidly. Everyone I think can acknowledge, but that creates some new challenges that have to be tackled, and for which flexibility can be a solution. So this flexibility is really the key to further decarbonize our energy mix, because it allows renewables to further be implemented in our energy mix. The need for flexibility is a major opportunity today for the fast movers because of that gap. And batteries play definitely a role in this flexibility and in these needs, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. So don't see that as the sole single solution. It's just one part of a bigger whole. And lastly, flexibility is cannibalistic, so it will decrease the opportunity by time as the more flexibility will be integrated. But we will be moving to an optimal balance, so it will not go to zero in the coming years. So that's why I brought my statement of negative prices being an opportunity, because it triggers the development of future-proof real estate with a resilient energy strategy. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Rees, and that was very useful, the recommendations. So Simon, I think we're ready for some real experience from implementing some of the solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, for having me here, and as well representing today the tenant view, and maybe raising a little bit of some critical points towards landlords, but I will do my best to give a realistic view of what we experience in our journey towards carbon neutral. So yeah, hello everyone on the screens and here in the auditorium. My name is Simon Delven, and I'm from DHL, working as a sustainable leader for corporate real estate in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Who does not know DHL, which is very unobviously that you can't miss this big yellow machine, but we're a big company with over 600,000 employees, and we have a big real estate department as well, because we have over 28,000 sites in more than 220 countries and territories. So if you want to have any further details, go onto our homepage. We're well set up for this. Diving into the real estate numbers or the sustainability figures, we own 295 aircrafts, where actually our main CO2 footprint comes from. We own 120,000 or more than 120,000 vehicles, of which are already 36,000 e-vehicles. We have 25,000 bikes, of which are 14,000 e-trikes and 5,500 e-bikes. And our total emissions are 33,027 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So quite a high CO2 footprint, but obviously as a logistic company, and we're doing transport with aircrafts and cars, this is yeah, actually what we have. As I said, we have over 600,000 employees and over 1,000 corporate real estate experts around the globe. And I said we have 28,000 facilities, of which are 12,000 are main locations and of greater importance. We have 3 international hubs around the world, being in Leipzig in Germany, the biggest one, Cincinnati in the US, and Hong Kong. And our headquarters is in Bonn in Germany. So what is our aim? What is our journey? Where it's going? So we have as a target as 2030 to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions under 29 million metric tons. So we're coming from 40 million metric tons in 2021. Actually, as probably every company, we want to grow as well. But even though we were growing, we want to still decrease our carbon footprint. And we're applying actually 3 main measures. So 30% of the fuels we're using in our airplanes, ships and trucks should come from a renewable source. 60% of our fleet in delivery should go to e-vehicles, and all our new and owned facilities should be CO2 neutral in operation. And I will deep dive a little bit on the last point and on our journey to it, how we make this successful and where we maybe struggled in the past. So in our strategy to make our buildings carbon neutral, we looked at the building and applied 20 standard levers, which we can group basically in 6 overall groups. So we have the environment, so everything like rainwater harvesting, biodiversity, this is a must-do. We want to apply in each new building. But as well, building automation plays an important part. The heating and cooling through heat pumps. So we want to get away from any emissions. That means, yeah, heat pump is the only way to electrify our heating and cooling. For sure, we want to have, if possible, renewable energies on the roof, mainly through PV. We've tried as well to get some wind power, but this is quite challenging next to our facilities. For sure, we apply LED lighting with sensors and electricity, as you heard. We're applying infrastructure for EV charging for our staff, but as well for our delivery vans and trucks. So this all sounds really great, and I think most of you in the audience will have similar programs, but what I want to do here today is an honest sharing of our challenges in the main technologies. I've seen as well that most of the listeners are maybe opponents or competitors towards us, but I think an open exchange on those topics for sustainability is just very important, because there are so many hurdles to overcome, and an honest exchange just brings us all further. And as well with the landlords, to have a not only the landlord view, but as well the tenant view, and have a united view towards the sustainability agendas. So let me start with the first technology, the LED implementation. So I would say LED is a very mature technology, mostly implemented, but we still see some challenges. So first of all, the complexity of LED, what they offer, is really high. So you can integrate probably every sensor you want to have in your lighting, and yeah, you can add functions. You do the DALI controls, etc. Our learning actually is try to keep it simple, because then. And this brings me to one of the next points. We always have a layout of the warehouse, but as well we have an operational layout, and this can change. So the more complex the installation is, the more cost it brings if you change the layout. And as well, having this applied for already 10 years, we say that the greatest failure comes as well with a greater complexity. So if we keep it simple, there's less failure, and it's actually what we want to have is a lighting which works when we are there and which shuts down when we're not there. So yeah, this is my first one, is keep it simple. Then what we've experienced, some landlords, but as well prior tenants, often lose low-cost solutions without sensors. So retrofitting sensors is really hard for us, but we just can achieve the maximum savings having sensors there. So this is another 30% savings on LED. I can totally understand that some landlords do not want to do the invest because they're not profiting from it, because the savings are with the tenant, but there needs to be better agreements between landlords and tenants to install the right technology, looking as well on the total cost of ownership, maybe over 5 or 10 years of the lifetime of the LED, and not doing the cheapest investment on day one. Another point is the proper handover of the installation. So Dries has shown some impressive pictures of the hangar. We've seen that as well, but as well the left side, which is prior installation, already with LEDs equipped. So yeah, you need normally to have a good handover, and we've very often seen that the supplier is doing his own handover. So actually telling himself, oh, you've done a great work and everything is according to standards, which very often when we come into the warehouses and do lux measurements of a new installation, this is not according to standards. We have shadowing, and yeah, this needs to be really taken into account to do a proper handover if you do a lighting installation, as well together with your landlord if the landlord funds it. And yeah, I think the phasing out of old lamps, like fluorescent lamps, has already been agreed ages ago in the EU, but we still see warehouses and landlords having old fluorescent lights in the warehouse, and yeah, some of them reluctant to change that and want to transfer that cost to the tenant. So this will cause maintenance issues by, for example, we as DHL are reluctant to take over any warehouse which is not fully equipped with LED, because we will have a problem very soon in the maintenance because fluorescent are not available on the market anymore. Good. Solar PV, other technology, other challenges. So as well, solar PV modules are a very mature technology in the market for decades already. But I think the fast path of growth has been in the last years due to, for example, the energy crisis here in Europe in the last years. The complexity for us as a big company, international company, even in the European market, every market is different. So we have different tariffs, we have different models, we have different grid connections, restrictions. So even if we have a landlord agreed on a principle over multiple countries, those market regulations make it really difficult for overall agreements over multiple countries. The complexity for retrofitting is relatively high, so you normally do your due diligence and you look if the statics are okay, and if the statics are okay, you need to look at the roof conditions, because the PV panels will be there for 20 years or 15 or 20 years or more. And this often raises a problem that the roof was not in the condition to last another 20 years. So the project was actually killed because it couldn't take or it couldn't swallow the roof repairs. Or it was said, okay, the regular maintenance for the roof is in 8 years, so we need to wait for the PV project another 8 years. Which for sure, for us as a tenant, we don't want to wait. We want to have it now, because maybe our lease is just 2-3 years. So this is a major challenge we face. Power purchase agreement are the main used agreement in the market. We, as from a tenant view, do not necessarily agree to that, so it can have its right to be a power purchase agreement, but we think the fairer split is a PV lease, so that means you pay a fixed sum for a PV installation, the landlord does. The landlord gets his investment back with a certain return of investment, and you get full liabilities, but as well the full profits of the PV system. To apply those, we've talked with a lot of landlords. Some are reluctant to not enter or not leave their sweet spot of PPAs. Some of them are really open, and we had really successful talks with some of them to do an open book contract and team up to say, okay, what is the best implementation partner? How can we reduce cost? And both actually have a winning in getting a payback out of the investment, but as well we getting green electricity in our sites. Yeah, so I think in general it needs for PV as well a fair split between risk and profits. This is as well maybe getting a little bit of the landlord side. If the landlord taking all the risk, for sure he should have the main profits. But if there's a sharing of risk, then there should be as well more profits with the tenant. Heat pump implementation. So very, let's say, hot topic. First of all, my take, it's quite expensive to retrofit it. And in most cases, it does deliver the best carbon savings, because the most carbon savings, at least in our warehouses, come from the heating system. And if you decarbonize the heating system, you have the biggest carbon savings. We believe for retrofitting those, it makes sense at end of the lifetime of the current heating system to not replace the current heating system with another fossil heating system like gas or oil, and replace it with a heat pump. But for sure, this has a higher cost, because you need to look at as well on the heat transmission side. So with the old gas system, you go in with a high temperature. With the heat pumps, you want to normally transmit the heat with a lower temperature to run them on a high efficiency. So this increases well cost, and if the landlord does the investment, I can totally understand that some of the costs need to be as well taken over by the customer. But I think if we would replace the old heating system with a gas system, this will be for sure become a stranded asset. So this is why when the old heating system fails, this is a great opportunity to talk about heat pump implementation. In point of market maturity, I can just give a little bit of an example we had in Germany. 3 years ago, we had around 150 sites in new builds, all equipped with heat pumps. And from those sites, we had a failure rate just in the installation of 40%. So that gives me the first indication that the market wasn't mature to install the heat pumps properly. And after we have solved all those problems, we have as well measured that most of the equipment is not running to the efficiency as it should. So I can just give as well, this is a point for landlord and tenant. If you make contracts with companies and installers, always look that the efficiency measure over years is a KPI, and if that is not hold, you get some kind of a kickback or someone actually acting on site to look why the efficiency is not as it should be. Good, we have heard a lot of battery storage from Dries as well as an opportunity. We see that as well as a big opportunity. Battery storage prices have been decreasing the last years tremendously. And yeah, we think it's time that battery storage is becoming a viable technology for us. So we were looking further into that. And it can have a wide-scale deployment for us. Like Dries already said, it has multiple use cases. So we need to experience a little bit more the different use cases, because you can't combine all the use cases together. So you need to identify what are the ideal use cases for your operation, what is the best payback, what are the opportunities. And we need to gain a little bit more technical understanding in this, and as well retrofitting those battery storage, because it looks very fine. It's just a container you put out of the facility, but you need to connect it somehow to your electrical infrastructure, and unfortunately it's not a plug-and-play solution. So this is where we need to gain a little bit more experience in what are the costs in really retrofitting battery storage, and what measures need to be taken. I can just recommend from own experience to always team up with your insurance departments, because battery storage might have special requests. And like the picture I've brought, which is not possible anymore for us, so install battery storage somewhere inside the building is not possible from our insurance anymore, so we need to place the container somewhere outside, which makes it even more complicated to connect it. So we believe the main driver for battery storage will be for us the maximizing usage of our on-site generation, and maybe, for example, producing energy during the day and using it in the night, because our operations may be just being at night, but as well all the other use cases Dri said as well really important, and we need to gain a little bit more experience with that. EV charging, actually my last technology I brought here. So EV charging for us is a little bit more than just installing an EV plug. So we're looking more into a holistic solution that ensures vehicles are charged when needed. So I can tell you we had so many angry calls after installing EV charging that during the night there was a failure while charging, and the next day we wanted to do a delivery and the the vehicle was not working. So we need to hire probably a petrol car. This is as well not what we intended to install EV chargers. So as well the maintenance regime need to be really good, the load balancing, etc. So it's a complex topic and you need to have a good solution, a good partner to deliver this. So it's not just the installation. DC charging, so high voltage charging, I think it's still in the early stages, not meaning for private cars, but as well for trucks, because at least our operations struggle a little bit with defining the clear demand, when to charge, what to charge, and unless this is unclear with the uncertainty factor, it's hard to plan DC charging for new buildings or retrofits. I think as well, being now a little bit of punisher of our operations, there's in general an underestimation of available power at site. So the power is limited somehow through the transformator, through the grid, yeah, a lot of people think this is unlimited power supply we can get everywhere at every time, which is not the case in most of the countries. So we believe for EV charging infrastructure implementation, we need a modification of our electrical infrastructure, yeah, to meet our EV goals, which are quite challenging for the next years. So I don't brought a closing slide actually, so it's a benefit for everyone who's listening live to this. But I think my biggest point here today is we need to work all together. First of all, exchanging experience, what I hopefully start, and maybe you're interested to connect via LinkedIn or other platforms to get to an exchange as well from tenant view, but as well to team up with your landlords and discuss openly what you can do and say, okay, let's do an open book contract, let's do pilots, let's try it, and try to engage and get things doing or get things moving. I think this is the only way we can yeah, get our targets fulfilled. Good, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Simon. And that's exactly why we're here, so we can discuss the topics with you directly as a customer. So following on that, Cinziana, the P3 view on consumption reduction.
Thank you very much, Julie. No, indeed, this is exactly the whole purpose of these discussions, of this workshop, to bring to the fore both the positives as well as the challenges of implementing all of these new technologies. As a landlord with going towards 10 million square meters, of course, future-proofing our portfolio is an extremely important element to us, and ESG is at the core of doing that, of future-proofing the portfolio. But the key is to really find the right solutions, and it's only through discussions, it's only through communication and collaboration and understanding and trialing and failing and learning from that that we will get there. So thank you very much. Everyone, for sharing all your experiences with us today. I don't want to take too much time from what will be the most engaging part of our workshop, which is the Q&A and discussion session, but I do want to bring one more aspect that complements what was discussed here today until now. And we did discuss about the different technologies, which are obviously all very relevant, but another aspect is you can have the best technologies, but if you don't use them well, it's for nothing. You could have the best LEDs if you left them on overnight without anybody using the warehouse. You're not doing any benefit to CO2 reductions or energy efficiency. And this is where these building automation systems or building management systems comes into play to really try to ensure that the technologies that are put inside the building are actually used in a way that optimizes the overall consumption of the building. And this is, I wanted to bring this topic up because it is a preoccupation for us at the moment. As I mentioned, we're trying to find the right solutions. And when we're talking about building management systems or building automation and control systems, there is a wide spectrum of what that can mean, from very basic ones to really very advanced and complicated ones, and that are even continue to become more advanced with the advent of AI. But when we look at it from the broader terms, what does it mean? It means that you start with measuring and understanding your consumption. Then you start with measuring the activity within the warehouse through different sensors or the temperature and other elements, environmental elements within the warehouse. And you plug all that into a system that actually can understand, collect the data, put it all together, as well as control those systems to be able to really redo your consumption, to reallocate your consumption patterns in a way that optimizes the efficiency of the operations. And this is somewhat of a circular element to it as well, because the more you change the consumption pattern, and then you see other possibilities of savings, and it's hopefully a virtuous circle going on. But what BMSs are all about in the end is putting some right infrastructure into place, but also using it right. So a BMS is only as good as it is correctly used by the occupiers in the building. If everything falls into place and it's a right system with the right usage, then the literature and the case studies that are public, which is not a lot at the moment, show a potential reduction in consumption anywhere between 10 and 30%. But I go back to what was the leitmotif of the entire discussion. It is about really a good collaboration between landlords and customers to really put together the right solution and the right usage. And the beauty of these approach and systems is that you can start even from the very basic implementation, the very basic solutions, and still get already benefits if you use it correctly. And I wanted to give here an example of something that we have been implementing successfully in the Czech Republic already for the last 4 years. And I would say it's the 1.0 approach to what we hope to improve further on through more complex building automation and control systems. But it really started from rolling out smart metering within the entire portfolio in the Czech Republic, putting thermometers for every 5,000 square meters of warehouse, as well as outside thermometers, and connecting all that to a software that can collect the data, make sense of it, and present it in an actionable way to the tenants. And by engaging with the tenants and showing what they can conclude from looking at these different information from the energy system, tenants started to change their behavior, whether it was a reduction by 1 degree of the temperature in the warehouse, or realizing that during the weekends they actually had some lights on or other equipment that should not have been on. Small changes really already delivered some results, and we have a couple of examples, and there are many, that show that over the last 2 years different tenants gained consumption reductions between 7 and 9% of their overall consumption. And again, this is just with small tweaks and with the very basic technology. And again, our whole focus at the moment is to really find the right balance, what is the right complexity of the solution that provides the optimum benefits for both tenants and landlords. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Julie, so we can get to the next phase of our workshop, which is a discussion.
Thanks a lot, Cinziana, and thanks a lot to you guys for all the insights and recommendations. So I think we're ready for the Q&A. Okay, so thanks a lot, first of all, for all the questions that have already come in. Just as a reminder, if you need the barcode again, please join Slido or just go to Slido. The hashtag is P3ESG. There are many questions coming in on different topics, so I'll probably mix it up so you don't have one person speaking all the time. But I'll start with Julian, a bit of a predictive question. Don't be worried. Should companies anticipate further changes to other EU directives following the omnibus package?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a bit of a complex one. The European Commission lost a lot, would argue, lost a lot of credibility with the publication of the omnibus package. A lot of organizations had invested quite a lot of money, and we're looking at hundreds of thousands of euros in setting up their reporting practices in anticipation of the CSRD. And reducing that scope by 80% meant a lot of organizations lost a lot of that money and had to roll back on those initiatives. And Cinziana, to your point at the very beginning, probably resources and energy that could have been invested in more practical solutions. So that being said, the optimistic approach would be that barring any further complications, and there's been a lot of discontent, I think, amongst the business community in general with that decision, that the Commission and other legislative bodies would be hesitant to roll back on anything further, and really try to build that credibility back up. So I think, especially when it comes to asset level regulations, and we're looking at the Energy Performance Buildings Directive, I didn't touch on it just for the sake of time, but the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directives as well, which have different requirements for member states to reduce energy consumption and increase renewable energy production. The optimistic and the hopeful approach would be that those are here to stay. And that certainly organizations should be looking at strategies and ways of reducing regulatory risk around those, and for opportunities, again, as we mentioned throughout today's workshop, for operational efficiency, energy efficiency, and reduced operational costs.
Thanks, Julian. And following on that a little bit, because I think it is connected, and perhaps we could get Simon and Cinziana's view on in this current climate and obviously the geopolitical situation as well. Do you see any general pushback on, or do you feel any pushback on the ESG matters in your organizations or from customers?
So I think the commercialization of ESG measures is always difficult. So I think yeah, it's different from customer to customer, but there as well, customers out there just going for the cheapest rent per square meter. And for sure, then we are struggling with our, I would say, higher requirements. And some are really asking for it and saying this is a standard where this is then easier for us. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed market there.
Cinziana?
From our side, I think we're seeing that the customers that were already focused on ESG are not changing their direction much at all. But what we were expecting following CSRD was that other customers will actually increase their ESG requirements. So I think this is where a pause is happening. I think all this, omnibus, as well as the general backlash, is just not giving an impetus to companies to really explore these areas if they already haven't, if they weren't on that path already.
Thank you. Going to the flexibility trees. So how can be flexibility added without obviously disrupting the warehouse operations?
That's a great question. Of course, the goal is to not have any impact on the core business of any operation. So a good point to start is to make an inventarization of all the electrical consumers to see what opportunities are there already. And what I see with my clients very often is that it's more about the ancillary consumers that do not directly interact with the overall operations of the warehouse. So for example, if there's PV installed on the roof, that's the main flexibility on producer side, for example, that you can curtail at a given moment. And of course, if you have covered all the assets that are already available on site and it's insufficient to cover the needs of flexibility, then batteries can of course make a solution there as well.
That's good. Gillian, the national level implementation of the EPBD, is it going to likely significantly change, and how should the managers of the pan-European portfolios prepare for that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the EPBD and other EU level directives are intended to be transposed by member states, and member states have a level of flexibility in terms of how they transpose certain provisions, more flexibility in some areas than others. So EPC calculation methods, for example, have been tightened, but things like how a zero emission building is actually calculated, so the emissions limits and energy consumption limits there will be up to the member states and will really vary by climate and by national grid infrastructure and everything else that comes along with energy for buildings in particular. So I think we're seeing, and we have seen in previous iterations of the EPBD and similar legislation, some divergence between member states. I would say the majority stay pretty true to the provisions of the directive, with the exception of where they are given some flexibility on methodology and calculations. But certainly in countries such as Germany and France, where there are already renewable energy installation obligations on new buildings and major renovations, in Spain, increased EV charging requirements. I think with the new EPBD, and certainly as EU member states continue to grapple with the other energy efficiency and renewable energy targets that they are intended to set, that might lead to more divergence and perhaps more stringent regulatory requirements than what the EPBD or similar pieces of legislation require. And so again, for us, the strategy there is really monitoring those developments on a country by country basis and having a cohesive, if not ambitious, strategy for managing those regulatory risks depending on the region.
Thanks, Gillian. Another one, Cinziana, probably for you. Were we as P3 successful in getting some incentives for implementing ESG features?
Yes, we were. We have some instances where we did get incentives from the state. I remember one instance in France for the implementation of BMS systems, as well as I think what's more widespread in general is those related to PVs, and we did have some good success in Czech Republic on that. Probably on overall, we probably haven't pursued those potential incentives to the level that they were really available, but when we did, yeah, they came out right.
Thank you. This is a good question. I think you probably each can share your view on that, but should you take the risk and be the first mover, or should you rather wait until the technology is kind of proven over time? Would you like to start, Cindy? Or?
Yes, sure. So in my view, you need to start by proving the technology, which is you need to start with piloting. I think there is a big risk in rolling out technologies that are not fully proven. So I am a believer in the step-by-step approach, especially in technologies that are not yet mature. And if you need to pilot, learn, and only afterwards really roll out. And also there is another aspect of a potential reduction in pricing, improvement of the technology and reduction in pricing, which you might lose on this if you are too aggressive in implementing it to begin with.
What do you think, Simon? Because obviously DHL has very ambitious ESG goals.
I would say it needs some first starters to test technologies. I would as well say we constantly get approached by different companies with the latest technology to have a really good review, technical review of is this technology really bringing the benefits they're promising. But I think I would totally agree with the point. There's a lot of technology already very mature in the market, and if we all would implement this already, I think we've been like 5 steps ahead. So I think there's a lot in the market which can be implemented.
Trace, anything you would like to share on that?
Yeah, I think from a technology point of view, these technologies are not new per se. I mean, all this technology that we've been discussing today, they've been existing for decades. I think the main challenges are more regarding like the implementation and the market conditions that they get in to really create the rentability that investors are looking for. And with any investment, there's usually a risk-rewards link, and that's the same with these technologies, like take batteries, for example. Yeah, the opportunity is there today, but you will need, of course, several years of good market conditions to really build that yield. And you can make prognoses, but sure, you're never. But that's not related to new technologies. That's just related to the needs of a market and how fast it will go. Because the more flexibility will be implemented in the market, the lower the opportunity will be there. So it really depends on that ratio and that speed of development.
Thank you. Julian, anything from your side?
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit of both, right? So again, coming from the regulatory perspective, there are several bits of technology that are already required: EV charging, renewable energy, BMS systems. So taking a look at the bare minimum and at least going for the proven technology, but certainly a strategy that our clients have used and have been very successful in, Cinziana, as you mentioned, is doing those pilot programs. So, potentially across your whole portfolio, picking out certain assets or areas where there is opportunity to pilot some new technologies while hedging your risks a little bit and integrating those proven technologies that are also already mandated under certain pieces of legislation.
Thank you. Simon, I think this one for you. So how important are the ESG credentials actually when you lease new space?
I think important to very important. I think if you ask our commercial managers, it's already quite a job to do the standard negotiation for a commercial deal, and it adds up for sure in complexity because there's a big business case, numbers, technology behind each technology. But again, if you team up with your landlord and you create a certain level of trust to each other, I think there can be a good implementation, and then it's, for me, a very important, but I'm ESG manager, so for sure it's important for me, but I think it gets more and more important as well in the companies and as well for the clients at the end.
Thank you. Cinziana, do you want to add something from our perspective?
I think it goes back to a question that we answered previously. It depends on how focused is that respective client on ESG technology. So, of course, clients like DHL, it's an important part of the discussions, but with others, it's not necessarily. So it depends.
Thank you. Another kind of general one, so perhaps you can all share a view. Do you expect some of the technologies to become cheaper over time? Trace, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think maybe for the renewable energy part, mainly solar. We hit rock bottom last December. Since then, it's slightly increased again. So I really don't think, in short term at least, that we will meet even lower prices than when we had back then. So today it's still a great investment because of the low levelized cost of electricity. For wind, that's a little bit less accessible. So that's maybe a bit of different stories, also completely different markets. For energy efficiency, depends on the project, of course. The newer technologies tend to lower in price, and of course batteries are not directly energy efficiency, but they are still very steep decline of pricings. While, for example, LEDs, relighting projects, they have been around for decades. So they also stabilize in price. It's usually the newer, the steeper the hill of decreasing prices. So.
Thank you. Simon?
Yeah, totally agree. So LED, I would say, stabilized since years. PV pretty solid, but I hope, for example, for the heat pump discussion to get further reduction, because this is a main blocker, or maybe some further subsidies or whatever a market makes to implement those. But I think at the moment, in a lot of cases, this is not a viable implementation, and this causes all the discussion between landlord and tenant. So if we can see that and hope for it, maybe yeah, especially for heat pumps, I would wish for further decrease in price.
Okay, ladies, Cynthia, Julian, anything
Nothing
to
to add.
Okay.
No, absolutely. But I think, and again, to emphasize that point, the availability of financial incentives and subsidies, you can reduce the cost yourself. So definitely would encourage looking into those opportunities at both a national and a regional level.
Thank you. So this one, what challenges do you see in the collaboration with customers on ESG matters? So maybe we can take it from two views, from Simon's view, the challenges with landlords, and from P3's view with customers. Simon, would you like to start? What are the challenges with landlords?
Yeah, so this is a general landlord, not P3 as a landlord.
Thank
but
you.
I think, yeah, some landlords are just not open to it. So they're still thinking, okay, I'm renting a big box, and this will be my business business model for the next 100 years, which I strongly disagree. So there's always the risk of a stranded asset, that legislation will put this asset aside. So yeah, I think the challenge is if you have stubborn landlords, to convince them of the technology. But if you have landlords who are engaged, who have their own ESG agenda, to align actually on the joint points of the agendas and then move ahead. So this depends a little bit as well on the maturity of the targets of the landlords.
Thank you. Cindy?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it really depends. I think the quality of the engagement and communication is really important in actually overcoming the potential challenges in the discussions on implementation of ESG technologies. I think going back to some points that Simon made in his presentation, it really is about finding the fair way to share the risk and rewards when implementing these technologies. And you can do that by really sitting down and walking transparently through each party's goals. But I will go even beyond that. I think one of the basic challenges that we have at the moment is really sometimes to collect information. So for the part of the portfolio, for example, where we're not controlling the utility contracts, we've not been extremely successful in actually getting the information about the consumption. So it would be great, and this is one of our goals, to really increase the number of buildings for which we can gather this information, because it is the basis on which you can therefore think about implementing measures and everything. And then I think taking it to the other extreme, I think what is important for the overall market is that all stakeholders really start recognizing the value in better buildings from an ESG perspective. And if that is implemented, if that is agreed at the market level, then it will be easier and easier for both landlords to implement them, for customers to require them, for investors to pay for them. So I think the market consciousness needs to elevate a little bit.
Thank you. We probably have time for one last question. So going back to the legislation, Julian, so any enforcements or penalties for non-compliance of the EBBD?
It's probably the most frequent question that I get. It depends, and I'll start to sound like a broken record. It depends on the member state, and it depends on how certain provisions are implemented. So if they're implemented at a national level versus at a local or a regional level, I think there's two different compliance mechanisms. So there's the regulatory compliance, financial penalties, these can be compounded. So, for example, in certain countries with EV charging requirements, if you're in breach of that, that penalty can compound over the duration that you're in breach of it until you do install those chargers. And others, that fine is a one-off, and actually, at times it can be cheaper to just absorb the fine. It's not something we encourage, but it could be cheaper to absorb the fine than to actually make the installations themselves. But on top of that, aside from the compliance mechanisms by governing bodies, I think you also start to see a reduction in asset value, in tenant interest, and in in stakeholder engagement, credibility as an organization. I think those are all risks, and not necessarily something that you can put a financial number to, but certainly an impact on asset valuation and reputation as well is a big risk there.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I think the time is up. So first of all, thanks a lot for all the recommendations, all the insights. Thanks to everybody who joined us here in the room in Prague, and everybody who's online. We would love to hear your feedback. So we will be distributing a short survey after this event, and please let us know what topics are interesting for you so we can cover them in the future. And also, if you would like to contact, obviously, any of our experts today, we will be sharing their contact details, and definitely feel free. So with that, thank you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you.